Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live at the Library, U.S. Poet Laureate Ada Limon's opening reading. Please welcome the 14th Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden.
Well, good evening, and welcome to the Library of Congress, everyone here in our Jefferson building and through our live stream. I'm delighted to see a full crowd here tonight to celebrate our new Poet Laureate. It says applause. Now, because this event is part of our very successful Live at the Library series, which we kicked off this May, and each Thursday night, this building, the Thomas Jefferson Building, stays open late to offer wonderful programs and exhibitions. We have food and libations available for purchase. And we offer, more importantly though, new ways to connect to the wealth of our resources here at Library of Congress. And you can find out more by tuning into loc.gov. However though, as Librarian of Congress, I have the opportunity to highlight the awe-inspiring history of the institution in ways that move, I think, this country forward. For instance, I am tasked with appointing the Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry, otherwise known as the United States Poet Laureate, an 85-year-old position that poets such as Elizabeth Bishop, Gwendolyn Brooks, Robert Frost, and Robert Hayden have held. I previously appointed Tracy K. Smith and Joy Harjo as Poet Laureate, and both expanded the position's reach with their signature projects, American Conversations and Living Nations, Living Words. Well, tonight, we all start again with a new Poet Laureate. And I want to tell you, it was a long and very substantive process to get to this moment. It began 6 months ago with a nationwide solicitation that yielded nominations by over 100 critics, scholars, art administrators, previous laureates, and then an internal recommending committee put forward finalists for me to consider, and I had several meetings to discuss. We even read poems to each other. That was a moment. But one poet stood out from the beginning during this whole process, a poet whose name I kept seeing and hearing, and that was Ada Limón. And I've had a chance to spend time with her, and she's already taken the opportunity to learn more about the Library of Congress. She's met with the librarians and curators and visited the reading rooms of the American Folklife Center, Manuscript Division, Prints and Photographs Division, Rare Books and Special Collections, and she visited our historic Hispanic reading room, part of our Latin American, Caribbean, and European division. She's been busy already. And I'd like to note that Archer Huntington's gift all those decades ago helped establish the laureateship and the library's Hispanic division. And that gift supports both today, connections and history. So we're all eager to see how Ada will connect and continue to connect with the library going forward. But first, we need to celebrate, and that's why we're here tonight, her poetry. By tradition, the laureates begin their appointments by giving a reading here in the Coolidge Auditorium. And we ask the laureates to read from the body of their work, to show for those in the audience, in person and virtually, for posterity, how they represent the pinnacle of the art. In her 6 poetry collections, Ada has shown time and again how poetry connects us to each other and the natural world at a time when we certainly need that. Her poems welcome us as intimates in the language of the familiar, the space of the everyday. It is here where her poems find awe and love and loss, here where they do the necessary work of facing uncertainty and adversity, of helping us all remember. Her poems show us that we can resist and reveal, we can unsettle and soothe in ways that slow us down and focus us, that help and challenge us to see and hear and feel more meaningfully. So please join me in welcoming to our stage the 24th Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry, our U.S. Poet Laureate, Ada Limón.
Wow. Wow. This is never something you expect to happen to yourself. And I had a lot of big dreams as a child, so this didn't even come close. I had no idea. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like it's so important to gather for these events and be reminded of the historical significance of events like this. Beloved Kentucky writer Bell Hooks said, "Rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion." Like healing, art is also not something made in isolation. It is not the act of the singular mind or the individual talent. It is made in community. It's made with and for each other. Tonight, I feel that more than ever. Over the last month or so, I received messages from my friends and family from all over the country that said they were going to be here this evening. And as I was getting ready this evening, I turned to my husband and said, "One thing's for sure. We roll deep." And we do. We roll deep. As Muriel Rukeyser wrote, "What 3 things can never be done? Forget, keep silent, stand alone." And we don't stand alone. And perhaps that's why I feel like this appointment, as historic and monumental as it is to me personally, this night doesn't feel like it's about me. It feels like it's about us. It feels like tonight is about everyone who risks making art in a world that often deems art unnecessary, or worse, frivolous. A world that often doesn't support the makers of art. But tonight, standing on this legendary stage in the Library of Congress, where Lydia Mendoza played her guitar and Gabriela Mistral read her poems, we are reminded that not only has art and literature and the creative mind always been important, it is essential to our humanity, so that our lives are not just about surviving, but flourishing. With that in mind, I want to thank the artists here tonight, the writers, the musicians, the actors, the photographers, the painters, the dancers, and the poets, always, always the poets. And I too want to acknowledge everyone who didn't get the chance to make art because circumstances didn't allow room for their creative life. Perhaps you crossed a border, like my grandfather, Francisco Carlos Limón, and had had to have art be secondary to carving out a whole new life in a new country. Or perhaps there was no one around to say that art was possible. I want to celebrate you too and say making art is possible. It's part of what makes us whole. I was lucky enough to be raised by people who supported my creative life. My mom's paintings grace the cover of every book I've written, and my stepdad, Brady, has been making me a better writer since I was 10 years old. My father, Ken Limón, who is here tonight, and my, who has taught me so much about not just looking out for yourself as an artist, but how you can practice self-care and make sure your heart is okay while you do this work. My stepmother, Linda, who has never stopped supporting me, my true brothers and their families, my best friends, whom I'd be nothing without. They are my foundation. Of course, I want to thank Dr. Carla Hayden for appointing me as the 24th Poet Laureate of the United States. That doesn't get old. That's not going to get old. And Rob Casper for guiding me with his endless enthusiasm and joy. And all the folks at Milkweed Editions and all my publishers, to Daniel Slager, to my publicist, Michael Takens, and my literary agent, Rob McQuilkin, and of course to my dear, dear representative, my twin, Vaughn Fielder, without whom I could not do this at all. I couldn't do it. And finally, to my husband, who is such a light and such a gift. And he told me to wear red tonight. He chose the red suit. He chose the red suit because he said, tonight was not a night to be subdued. So let us not be subdued. I'm going to read across my collections, which is a tradition started with my mentor, Phil Levine. And so I wanted to honor him and do a similar thing. I'll begin with my first book, Lucky Rack. This is the original cover. It's been re-released. And I wanted to read this poem to begin with because it has, to me, for those of us who've had names that are maybe more difficult to pronounce than others, and you feel like it's your own little flag, like, no, this is how you say, and you've been tired of correcting it. I feel like this is a poem about that. Farmer's Almanac. According to the Farmer's Almanac, the best day to slaughter animals is the 25th of this month. And all my horoscope said today was, hooray for the differently sane. The country I occupy is different than yours. We both pretended the vegetable steamer was a spaceship and at one point or another watched it reel fly into the kitchen. My brother once pounded nails into the wood garden fence in the shape of a hot rod, and then he drove a hot rod in it. It was a hot rod inside a hot rod. And I fell in love with men forever. You there, I am collapsing. Is it as adorable as it feels? Sincerity is what my meal is made out of. July 1st will be the best day to eat a meal of sincerity. At the dinner table, I still sit on my knees like I'm praying all the time for more trouble. 1,000 toothpicks represent 1,000 soldiers in this child's history report. 1,000 toothpicks represent 1,000 soldiers in this toothpick report. But they still cannot stop gravity from burying the things it tugs. According to the Farmer's Almanac, this month I am one more than falling down. I am down falling. I am catchless. To manage to miss things is an improbable act. To refer to people as things proves that I miss more of myself than of others. According to the Farmer's Almanac, the master of invisibility finds himself dining too often alone. In my country, Exploding things come from the inside, like a sparkler, and everyone notices and wants to warm their hands on your burning body. If I meet you again, let's make inappropriate sounds all over town. And by inappropriate, I mean the sounds of our names. This is a poem. This book was all written in the very early 2000s. So this was a poem right after September 11. Frontier of never leaving. If the wound you cover is made of sheet metal and iron gates left over from the junkyard of forever worried and the school of always broken, here, I've saved you a seat. If you have hidden your outlawed books in your mattress and your outlawed thoughts in your hands, here, I will give you refuge. This is what I heard underneath it all, underneath and in the beginning, but now, maybe let's move to Canada. I hear it's nice and they don't kill each other as often. I can even forgive them for speaking French. Really, not all of them speak French. But would I miss it if I moved to Canada and there is no war in spring? I won't miss Iowa, that's for certain, but it's the only thing. The fields keep growing longer like a veil between us, the mountains like sutures on the map, and yet they are ours, the way mustard can be ours off the highway and windmills in the deserts and roads, even roads. Barbed wire between us, fences between us, the road runner has run into the river, and misters, you do not care. Another puzzle piece of my American map has unfolded. I am the only thing that fits together here, in this frontier of never leaving. Today, I'm going to play the record of the revolution. Everybody's going to sing along, and the more we turn it up, the less the flag will wave over you, and the more it will become a swallowtail and migrate to our houses, the little ones in the back, the ones with the lights in the windows. Look. You can see them now, opening their doors in the fog. Thank you. My second book is called This Big Fake World, and I brought it here, but it's a story in verse. So it's very hard to read one poem out of sequence, so I'm going to skip it, but I wanted to bring it so it didn't feel bad. Because that's how my brain works. This is the title poem of my third book, Sharks in the Rivers. And I should thank my sister-in-law, Ada Limón, who gave me this quote, who sent it because she knew I was very scared of sharks. Sharks in the rivers. We'll say unbelievable things to each other in the early morning, our blue coming up from our roots, our water rising in our extraordinary limbs. All night I dreamt of bonfires and burn piles and ghosts of men and spirits behind those birds of flame. I cannot tell anymore when a door opens or closes. I can only hear the frame saying, "Walk through." It is a short walkway into another bedroom. Consider the handle, consider the key. I say to a friend how scared I am of sharks, how I thought I saw them in the creek across from the street. I once watched for them holding a bundle of rattlesnake grass in my hand, shaking like a weak leaf girl. She sends me an article from a recent National Geographic that says, "Sharks bite fewer people each year than New Yorkers do." According to Health Department records. Then she sends me on my way into the city of sharks. Through another doorway, I walk to the East River saying, "Sharks are people too. Sharks are people too. Sharks are people too." I write all the things I need on the bottom of my tennis shoes. I say, "Let's walk together." The sun behind me is like a fire, tiny flames in the river's ripples. I say something to God, but he's not a living thing, so I say to the river. I say, I want to walk through this doorway, but without all those ghosts on the edge. I want them to stay here. I want them to go on without me. I want them to burn in the water. This poem, it's funny, I wrote this poem probably in 2008 or so, and yet it feels like it could have been about today. The same thing. There's an awful story in the news. For days you cannot sleep. It's too hot, it's too cold. It's just a story in the news. Not another human, not a whole country, not another animal, just a piece of paper. Then you feel a little better. You go to the train and wear your headphones. You listen to a sad song that sounds familiar. You pass a store window and there's someone you don't know walking where you're walking. Heels, a summer dress, hair tied up too fancy for the week. The television says, tomorrow night they will shed some light on hell. How far do we need to search for some bad thing? Hell is not beneath us, not a bargaining chip with your children. You come home on the train, and you have bought gifts and tried to be decent. This is how your life will go. You know that. Day after day, awful acceptance, the soft life of your footprints. You start to think of the alternative. You shake your real shirt off in the hallway. Would it be the same if you were born in Mexico? Life, Cuba, Ireland, 1974. You miss everyone, even the people you read about today you didn't know, their faces on the brain as if on paper. You sit on the balcony, which is really a fire escape, but you call it the balcony to make it sound better. You wear the slip your grandmother gave you 15 years ago. The weather is nice, California nice. You sing a little, call your family. You think things aren't so bad. You say you love the world, so love the world. Maybe you don't even say it for yourself. Maybe you move your mouth like everyone moves their mouth. Maybe your mouth is the same mouth as everyone's, all trying to say the same thing. I felt like I couldn't read from my book, Bright Dead Things, without reading this poem. It's a poem about horses. And my friend Adam Clay is here, and I sent it to him right before I went out to watch the horses. And he said, don't change a thing. So, how to triumph like a girl. I like the lady horses best. How they make it all look easy. Like running 40 miles per hour is as fun as taking a nap or grass. I like their lady horse swagger after winning. Ears up, girls, ears up. But mainly, let's be honest, I like that they're ladies. As if this big, dangerous animal is also a part of me. That somewhere inside the delicate skin of my body, there pumps an 8-pound female horse heart. Giant with power, heavy with blood. Don't you want to believe it? Don't you want to lift my shirt and see the huge, beating, genius machine that thinks? No, it knows. It's going to come in first. One for the ladies. My stepmother of 26 years passed away in 2010, and this is a poem, it's a prose poem that I wrote really probably just maybe 6 months to a year afterwards. And maybe those of you grieving can relate to it. After you toss around the ashes. When she was dying, it was impossible to see forward to the next minute. What was happening for whole weeks was all that was happening and happening and happening. Months before that, I got the dumb soup wrong. How awful. It was all she wanted, and I had gotten it wrong. Then, in the airless days when it was really happening, we started to power panic, and we didn't know enough. What should we do with her ashes? Water or dirt? Water or dirt? Once she asked just to be thrown into the river, where we used to go, still alive but not living anymore. After it was done, I couldn't go back to my life. You understand, right? It wasn't the same. I couldn't tell if I loved myself more or less. It wasn't until later, when I moved in with him and stood outside on our patchy, imperfect lawn, that I remembered what had been circling in me. I am beautiful. I am full of love. I am dying. I wanted to read that poem for many reasons, but I think sometimes it's always nice to perform a little resurrection from the people you miss. This is a poem that ends the collection, Bright Dead Things, and it's, I think of it as an apocalyptic love poem, which seems kind of useful today. The conditional. Say tomorrow doesn't come. Say the moon becomes an icy pit. Say the sweet gum tree is petrified. Say the sun's a foul black tire fire. Say the owl's eyes are pinpricks. Say the raccoon's a hot tar stain. Say the shirt's plastic ditch litter. Say the kitchen's a cow's corpse. Say we never get to see it. Bright future, stuck like a bum star, never coming close, never dazzling. Say we never meet her, never him. Say we spend our last moments staring at each other, hands knotted together, clutching the dog, watching the sky burn. Say it doesn't matter. Say that would be enough. Say you'd still want this, us, alive, right here, feeling lucky. Thank you. I read that poem once with my friends Adam and Michael while we were on tour. We used to tour the country with loading up our books in the back of a Subaru and going all over the place. And the joke was that I was always like, "Who's going to carry my books?" And that was me. I was carrying my books. But they also, after hearing that poem probably one too many times, came up to me and said, "How do you say raccoon?" And I said, "You know, a raccoon." They were like, "No." They were like, "You're making it sound like the most beautiful, elegant animal. Like a raccoon, a raccoon." They're like, "No, it's a raccoon." But now I can't think about it because it's too late. That's just how I say raccoon. Just sharing that with you. This is my fifth book called The Carrying, and I had initially wanted to start at the whole collection with this poem that I'm about to read, and my editor was really wonderful. Was like, it's a lot to start the whole collection with. So I thought maybe I could place it in the middle of the reading, and it wouldn't be a lot. It is a lot. The Leash. After the birthing of bombs, of forks and fear, the frantic automatic weapons unleashed, the spray of bullets into a crowd holding hands, that brute sky opening in a slate metal maw that swallows only the unsayable in each of us. What's left? Even the hidden nowhere river is poisoned orange and acidic by a coal mine. How can you not fear humanity? Want to lick the creek bottom dry, to suck the deadly water up into your own lungs like venom? Reader, I want to say, don't die. Even when silvery fish after fish comes back belly up, and the country plummets into a crepitating crater of hatred, isn't there still something singing? The truth is, I don't know. But sometimes I swear I hear it, the wound closing like a rusted over garage door, and I can still move my living limbs into the world without too much pain, can still marvel at how the dog runs straight toward the pickup trucks, breaknecking down the road because she thinks she loves them, because she's sure without a doubt that the loud, roaring thing will love her back, her soft, small self alive with desire to share her goddamn enthusiasm. Until I yank the leash back to save her because I want her to survive forever. Don't die, I say. And we decide to walk for a bit longer, starlings high and fevered above us, winter coming to lay her cold corpse down upon this little plot of earth. Perhaps we are always hurtling our bodies toward the thing that will obliterate us, begging for love from the speeding passage of time. And so maybe, like a dog, obedient at my heels, we can walk together, peacefully, at least until the next truck comes. And this is a poem that I read once in D.C. in 2018. And I thought, this is a poem that will make sure that I'm never the Poet Laureate of the United States. But I'm going to read it tonight. A new national anthem. The truth is, I've never cared for the national anthem. If you think about it, it's not a good song. It's too high for most of us, with the rocket's red glare, and then there are the bombs. Always, always, there is war and bombs. Once I sang it at homecoming and threw even the tenacious high school band off key. But the song didn't mean anything, just a call to the field, something to get through before the pummeling of youth. And what of the stanzas we never sing? The third that mentions no refuge could save the hireling or the slave. Perhaps the truth is every song of this country has an unsung third stanza. Something brutal snaking underneath us, as we absent-mindedly sing the high notes with a beer sloshing in the stands, hoping our team wins. Don't get me wrong. I do like the flag. How it undulates in the wind like water, elemental, and best when it's humbled, brought to its knees, when it's clung to by someone who has lost everything, when it's not a weapon, when it flickers, when it folds up so perfectly you can keep it again until it's needed, until you can love it again, until the song in your mouth feels like sustenance, a song where the notes are sung by even the ageless woods, the short grass plains, the Red River Gorge, the fistful of land left unpoisoned, that's sung that is our birthright. It's sung in silence when it's too hard to go on. That sounds like someone's rough fingers weaving into another's. That sounds like a match being lit in an endless cave. The song that says, my bones are your bones, and your bones are my bones. And isn't that enough? I feel really honored and privileged to be here during Hispanic Heritage Month. And I got to meet with some congressional members today, which was wonderful, and we spoke about that. And on the way back, I was chatting with Kimberly Crawford here at the Library of Congress, and we were talking about identity and the complications of it. And it made me think of this poem, which to me is a lot about how sometimes we feel like what people are looking for is representation, and sometimes it gets skewed and representation can feel like tokenism. And this is a poem about that experience. And it's also for my father, who's right here. The contract says we'd like the conversation to be bilingual. When you come, bring your brownness so we can be sure to please the funders. Will you check this box? We're applying for a grant. Do you have any poems that speak to troubled teens? Bilingual is best. Would you like to come to dinner with the patrons and sip Patron? Will you tell us the stories that make us uncomfortable, but not complicit? Don't read us the one where you are just like us, born to a greenhouse, garden. Don't tell us how you picked tomatoes and ate them in the dirt, watching vultures pick apart another bird's bones in the road. Tell us the one about your father, stealing hubcaps, after a colleague said that's what his kind did. Tell us how he came to the meeting wearing a poncho and tried to sell the man his hubcaps back. Don't mention your father was a teacher, spoke English, loved making beer, loved baseball. Tell us again about the poncho, the hubcaps, how he stole them, how he did the thing he was trying to prove he didn't do. I'll say this, that there's twofold to that poem, of course, two snakes that run inside of it. And the true story that my father, after a colleague did say, I don't want to park my car in this parking lot because the Mexicans here will steal my hubcaps. My dad did go out and steal the man's hubcaps. And actually, when he made such an incredible point, of course, and when he moved on from that school district, they actually gave him an engraved hubcap. And this is a poem I wanted to read that really feels like every time I read it, feels like, oh, I needed to hear that. So it feels like I didn't write it. Instructions on not giving up. More than the fuchsia funnels breaking out of the crabapple tree, more than the neighbors' almost obscene display of cherry limbs shoving their cotton candy-colored blossoms to the slate sky of spring rains. It's the greening of the trees that really gets to me. When all the shock of white and taffy, the world's baubles and trinkets, leave the pavement strewn with the confetti of aftermath, the leaves come, patient, plodding, a green skin growing over whatever winter did to us, a return to the strange idea of continuous living. Despite the mess of us, the hurt, the empty. Fine then, I'll take it, the tree seems to say, a new slick leaf unfurling like a fist to an open palm. I'll take it all. And then I'll close with a few poems from the newest book, which is The Hurting Kind. This is a poem, it's another prose poem that I wrote for my stepmother, who passed away in 2010. Her name was Cynthia. For Cynthia. At the cabin in Snug Hollow, near McSwain Branch Creek, just spring. All the animals are out, and my beloved and I are lying in bed in a soft silence. We are talking about how we carry so many people with us wherever we go, how even when simply living, these unearned moments are a tribute to the dead. We are both expecting to hear an owl as the night deepens. All afternoon from the porch, we watched an eastern towhee furiously build her nest in the untamed forsythia, with its yellow spilling out onto the horizon. I told him that the way I remember the name forsythia is that when my stepmother Cynthia was dying that last week, she said lucidly but mysteriously, "More yellow." And I thought, yes, more yellow, and nodded because I agreed, of course, more yellow. And so now in my head, when I see that yellow tangle, I say, for Cynthia, for Cynthia, for Cynthia, for Cynthia, more yellow. It is night now, and the owl never comes, only more of night and what repeats in the night. During the height of the pandemic, when most of us were going through lockdown, I started to feel like it was a time maybe to revisit myths that were no longer important, personal myths that no longer were necessary. And for me, one of them was about how, because my parents were divorced, that I was somehow from like a broken family. And this poem came to me when I was standing in the backyard thinking about my family and my father and my mom and everyone I missed, and this poem came to me. Joint custody. Why did I never see it for what it was? Abundance. 2 families, 2 different kitchen tables, 2 sets of rules, 2 creeks, 2 highways, 2 step-parents with their fish tanks or 8-tracks or cigarette smoke or expertise in recipes or reading skills. I cannot reverse it, the record scratched and stopping to that original chaotic track. But let me say, I was taken back and forth on Sundays, and it was not easy, but I was loved each place. And so I have 2 brains now, 2 entirely different brains. The one that always misses where I'm not, and the one that is so relieved to finally be home. This is a poem I want to read from my grandfather, Francisco Carlos Limón, and I know that my father's here, but also my Aunt Patsy's here, so it's nice to be able to read this poem for him in front of 2 of his children. And I've got cousins here too, so again, we roll deep. This is a poem I wanted to write for him that explores, I think, how sometimes it's difficult to find art and to make art. And yet I want to acknowledge that he was such a creative person. Heart on Fire. As a foster child, my grandfather learned not to get in trouble. Mexican and motherless, dead as she was from tuberculosis, he practiced words in a new language and kept his slender head down. When the other boys begged him to slip into the music shop's upper window to steal harmonicas for each of them, music being important, thievery being secondary, he refused. When the cops came to spot the boys who robbed the music store, they could easily find the ones spitting broken notes into the air, joyously mouthing the stainless steel, mimicking men on street corners busking for coins. But not my grandfather. He knew not to risk it all for one stolen moment of exaltation. It's easy to imagine this is who I come from, a line of serious men who follow the rules. But might I add that later he was a dancer, a singer, an actor whose best roles ended up on the cutting room floor, a cut-up, a ham who liked a good story, who would have told you life was a series of warnings, but also magic. Once he was sent for a box of matches, and he put that box of strike anywheres in the pocket of his madras shirt and ran home. He ran so fast to be on time, to be good, and when he did so, the whole box ignited. So he was a boy running down the canyon road with what looked like a heart on fire. He'd laugh when he'd tell you this. A heart on fire, he'd say, so you'd remember. And I'll just read 3 more poems. This is a love poem for my husband. It'd be really weird if it was not. Against nostalgia. If I had known back then you were coming, when I first thought that love could be the thing to save me after all, if I had known, would I have still glued myself to the back of his motorcycle while we flew across the starless bridge over the East River to where I grew my first garden, behind the wire fencing in the concrete raised beds lined by ruby twilight roses? If I had known, it would be you, who even then I like to look at across a room, always listening rigorously, a self-questioning look, the way your mouth was always your mouth. Would I have climbed back on that bike again and again until even I was sick with fumes and the sticky seat too hot in the early fall? If I had known, would I have still made mistake after mistake until I had only the trunk of me left, stripped and nearly bare of leaves? If I had known, the truth is, I would have kneeled and said, sooner, come to me sooner. And I want to read this poem, Privacy. And because poets like this, we like to say penultimate. So this is the penultimate poem. We just like to throw it into conversations. We do, right? We do, penultimate. This is a poem that I wrote really deep into the isolation of the pandemic, and I know that we're still going through it, and also what it is to sort of be in nature and want to transform nature into something else, but also recognizing that nature is like, no, I am my own thing. You're part of me. I'm not part of you. So it's a poem that was published in the New Yorker, and I think Kevin Young is here tonight, so thank you for publishing it. Privacy. On the black, wet branches of the linden, still clinging to the umber leaves of late fall, 2 crows land. They say, stop. And still, I want to make them into something they are not. Odin's ravens, the Bruja's eyes. What news are they bringing from our world to the world of the gods? It can't be good. More suffering all around, more stinging nettles and toxic blades shoved into the scarred parts of us, the minor ones underneath the trees. Rain comes while I'm still standing, a trickle of water from whatever we believe is beyond the sky. The crows seem enormous, but only because I am watching them too closely. They do not care to be seen as symbols. A shake of a wing, and both of them are gone. There was no message given, no message I was asked to give, only their great absence and my sad privacy, returning like the bracing, empty wind on the black, wet branches of the linden. And thank you all for being here. This has been really, truly wonderful. It's trying not to cry through it. And this is a poem I wrote at the very beginning of isolation and thinking about people would call you. It's an interesting thing to be a poet. People will call you under the strangest circumstances and think you have advice. And so they were like, it's a global pandemic. What do you have to say about this? And I was like, I think you should call someone else, maybe a scientist. And I felt like there were moments where people were putting this like, now more than ever, poetry. And I love that, and I do feel like that. But there are also moments where it feels like, no, like people were like, we need poems. And I was like, we need a vaccine. And so I was trying to find my way back into poetry, and how can you write through these moments that feel so absurd in some ways, that like, how can you find yourself and find your music and hear what you need to say? And so what happened was I kept thinking about poems I wanted to write, and then I would tell myself like, oh, you've already done that, or oh, you can't write about that. And so then, of course, what came out of it was a poem. The end of poetry. Enough of osseous and chickadee and sunflower and snowshoes, maple and seeds, samara and shoot. Enough chiaroscuro, enough of thus and prophecy and the stoic farmer and faith in our Father and 'tis of thee. Enough of bosom and bud, skin and God not forgetting, and star bodies and frozen birds. Enough of the will to go on and not go on, or how a certain light does a certain thing. Enough of the kneeling and the rising and the looking inward and the looking up. Enough of the gun and the drama and the acquaintance's suicide, the long-lost letter in the dresser. Enough of the longing and the ego and the obliteration of ego. Enough of the mother and the child and the father and the child. Enough of the pointing to the world, weary and desperate. Enough of the brutal and the border. Enough of, can you see me? Can you hear me? Enough, I am human. Enough, I am alone and I am desperate. Enough of the animal saving me. Enough of the high water. Enough sorrow. Enough of the air and its ease. I am asking you to touch me. You've been amazing. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Ada, for starting off your laureateship in such a powerful way. And thanks to all of you, our capacity crowd, for being here to help Ada launch her laureateship. I'm Rob Casper, head of poetry and literature here at the library, and I have just a few announcements before we end. First, we'll have a book signing upstairs, just in the floor above in LJ 113. Two things. The books will be for sale in the bookshop, which is just out the door and down to the left. Second, Ada will only sign her name, enter her own books, and there will be no personalization. And she asked that you continue to wear your masks for the signing. Also, for those of you who are new to the Library of Congress, I'd urge you to come back for our amazing Thursday night programming and look out for our soon-to-be-announced Bobbitt Prize reading later this fall, plus Ada's return to the library for her closing event in April. And finally, you can learn more about our laureate, listen to almost 80 years of poetry recordings, and learn more about this, the world's largest library, at loc.gov. Thank you all for coming, and have a great night.